Okay, so hi everybody. So those of you in America, good evening, and in Australia, it's good morning. So again, we have an example of a dependent origination, showing that everything's empty of any true existence. So let's take our understanding of things dependently existing and being empty at the very same time to engage in this class, which is really focused around our compassion, so taking the essence. So we'll begin by setting our motivation in taking refuge together in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and cultivating a mind of enlightenment. But please just get comfortable in your seat. Now try to make sure your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And you can keep your eyes open or close them, whatever seems more natural. And while you're breathing normally and naturally, become aware of the movements that are taking place within your body as you inhale and exhale breath. So the body is relaxing and the mind is focused. And with the mind focused and the body relaxed, imagine that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas appear in the space above you, and at the very same time, you're surrounded by all sentient beings. And within this vast crowd of sentient beings, there are your parents, people you have great affection for, your close friends, your peers. There are many people who are strangers to you at present. And there are some people that you have misunderstandings with and sort of dislike. And what you're going to do is to lead each and every one of these people into the practice of taking refuge and generating a mind of enlightenment. You're doing this because you understand that all of us as sentient beings are suffering to some degree or another. You know that these different forms of suffering have causes, and these causes are supported by conditions. Therefore, they're dependent arisings. And as dependent arisings, they can be altered, changed. And you've decided to make these changes, to put an end to suffering and its causes, and to develop all of the good qualities that are possible to develop by relying upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And because you acknowledge that there's really no difference between yourself and others, you have taken on this responsibility to lead others into the refuge, into the three jewels. So please join me in saying, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I think that in response to this prayer of ours, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the sentient beings surrounding you. and they wash away every hindrance and obstacle to becoming an authentic refugee, relying upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You recollect the sentient beings surrounding you, and in response to them arise these four boundless thoughts. And so you say, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and the hatred for enemies. And in response to this wish of ours, again, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the beings surrounding you. At every obstacle and hindrance, these four immeasurable thoughts are washed away, and they're replaced by boundless love, boundless compassion, boundless joy, and boundless equanimity. You recollect the field of merit above you, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and you now say, reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and I rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. And to avoid clinging to the merit that we've created, we recollect the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, and with that knowledge, transform our body into the universal system, which we call a mandala. And now we're going to offer this to the merit field of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And so we say, this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Vidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kanayatayami. The Buddha accepts this offering of ours with delight. Now we look up into his face and we see him smiling at us. And we should look into his eyes and see that we are accepted and we feel completely at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart and it moves through space and comes to abide above the crown of your head. The emanation descends, enters the crown of your head, and comes down through your body to stop at the level of your heart, whereby its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And wherever sentient beings abide within space, think that they're touched by this light and utterly transformed into the fully awakened state. And that there is no difference between us and them. Them and us are mere ideas and they're completely vanished. And just rest the mind within this vast body of truth. And then the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space, re-enters your heart, and you feel embodied, and you're breathing normally and naturally. You can feel the seat beneath you. You understand that this meditation was one of imagination, and it has imprinted the mind with this process. And so it will act as a condition to bring about the enlightenment that you seek. And now I'm breathing deeply through your nostrils and exhale through your mouth, and then allow your eyes to flutter open. And then move your body whichever way you want to, whichever way you feel comfortable. And then gradually bring yourself and the screen in front of you into focus. Okay, so this is our second class.
I'm just going to change one setting, so
Okay.
remember to stop the screen share.
Oh, okay. So 1 moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can you spotlight Eddie? And there we go. How about that? Okay, we're going to try a new setting, and Eddie spotlighted instead of Miffy's empty chair.
Okay, then. Okay, so let's get back to our class. So this, like I said, this is the second class in the series of 4, and we'll have a look at what we did in the past. Okay. So in our previous class, the class last week, we discovered that empathy is not compassion, and we looked at 3 different types of empathy. There's emotional empathy, cognitive empathy, and compassionate empathy. And neither of these are the compassion we're talking about. And compassion itself mitigates suffering, meaning it helps to lessen or ease the intensity or impact of suffering. And that our ordinary compassion is polluted with attachment and expectation. Yet, it can serve as a foundation for great compassion. And this is what I also want to talk about today, is how we can sort of sift out some of the attachment and expectation, and then our ordinary compassion will be this basis. The material I've relied upon, again, is all coming from this book here, In Praise of Great Compassion. It's the same book I used last week. And as I just said, today's topics are really focused around this clearing of the foundation, working with our ordinary compassion, sifting out the attachment, expectation, and so forth, and then building on that. By starting on what we call like immeasurable compassion, and then going from immeasurable compassion into great compassion. Now, you might remember the slide from last week when we talked about the different aspects. Compassion has an aspect, it's to allay suffering. Its function is to find others' suffering to be unbearable. So we are included in the others. We can have compassion for ourselves. It manifests as sort of as I say, like to be non-cruelty, non-violence, non-aggressiveness. The near cause for it, or the thing that really sparks it off, is basically a sense of distress. This distress could be aimed at seeing the suffering of somebody else or oneself. And when it's successful, the cruelty is reduced, the aggressive nature of this thing is reduced. But when it fails, we find ourselves, our distress just sort of increases. We're the ones who actually experience it, and suffering is not reduced. We, in a way, sort of experience more suffering in a way. Now, I'll just have a look at some of the differences in compassion and ordinary compassion and great compassion, and show you how we're going to sort of like move from one to the other. And through this, we're also going to discover that there are some major differences between ordinary compassion and immeasurable and great compassion. But there's also some similarities too. So, ordinary compassion has these characteristics. It is partial, restrictive, mixed, and natural. So what we mean by partial here, it means it's usually just extended to those we are close to, those we naturally feel affection towards. So it is, let's see, it really doesn't move out beyond our sort of inner circle. And it's often restricted to human beings and some animals. Again, the animals that affection, we feel affection towards. And it is mixed, meaning that it's mixed with a sense of expectation. Like I was just saying, I remember this once when like I've had dogs many times in my life, and you feel really warm and affectionate towards the dog. And then one day I was sitting next to it, and it went to bite my face. Like I was just sitting there, and just turned around and went wham, and I don't know how it happened, but I just moved like that, and its jaws went unk. And boy, I was so scared. I jumped away, and immediately my affection for that dog had diminished markedly, right? I became, sort of worried, a little bit fearful about that dog.
And Eddie, of course, then there's the whole conundrum that happens with like the wildlife funds that everybody likes sponsoring, the pandas and the polar bears, but not the some boring old brown bird or a fish or a frog.
I'm having a lot of difficulty hearing you, so I don't know what you're saying.
You can't hear me at all?
No. Now, the other thing is about this compassion, this, what we call ordinary compassion. It's just a natural thing that we all have. We didn't have to be taught it or trained it. We have a natural sense of empathy towards ourselves, a natural sense of care to ourselves, to our pets, to our brothers and our sisters, to those close. We don't have, it was never taught to us. It's unnecessary. It's already there. Now, but great compassion is a little different. And even the, what we call immeasurable compassion is a little different than this. Like I said, it's got its similarities, but here we're going to just look at the difference. So when we're talking about this great compassion, or even the immeasurable compassion, it's a sense of being impartial. Right? So it's not just our brothers and our sisters and our pets, the close ones, it's the neighbors down the street. It's the people we've never met. It's like all sentient beings. So even those that have hurt us, like even though the dog, like I'm meant to sort of like retain my compassion for the dog, right? But I didn't, of course, when I was just a child. I didn't know about these things. So this, and not only does that, but it's really extensive So it covers like realms that we're not really familiar with. Like, for instance, the hungry ghost realms, the hell realms, the god realms, the demigod realms. So wherever there is a being with consciousness, our compassion will embrace that person. And it's unmixed, so it doesn't have within it these biased states of mind. It doesn't have the expectation, and it doesn't have the attachment in there. And of course, this is not a natural thing. Right? It's not natural for us to just be that way. So it has to be taught to us. And then not only does it need to be taught to us, we have to sort of embody it. We have to make ourselves a person who has great compassion, who is greatly compassionate. So when I was putting this class together, one of the things that really jumped out at me, and I thought, well, no wonder.
Eddie, just stop the screen share for a sec, so we can see you.
But I remember, straight away I thought, oh, that's why it's so easy to lose our compassion. Right? So, like I said, we've all got ordinary compassion, but as you all know, because it has this expectation and attachment within it, poisoning might be too hard a word, but it's in there. It's really hard for us to maintain our compassion. So our compassion wavers a lot. Like when we get what we want, yeah, we care about you. But if we don't, then our caring just sort of vanishes. Like it can very quickly turn into rage and anger and upset, all sorts of different things. And thinking about that, I thought, that's right. We know about this phenomenon called great compassion. We know about the phenomenon called immeasurable compassion. But if we don't actually train ourselves in it, we're not going to be that sort of person. The mind will not be able to hold these ideas, not make the idea more than an idea. Just like, for instance, so I know that people can drive cars. I see people driving cars like all the time, right? So I know cars can be driven, but I don't know how to drive a car. So I can't drive a car. So here it's like us, so we know about great compassion, we know about immeasurable compassion, but if you ask yourself, am I one of those people that is like that? You're probably saying, well, no. No, my compassion wavers, it goes up and down, it's changeable. So just like me, I wasn't taught to drive a car, and then I've never driven cars. So I don't know how to do it. And if I was in one trying to drive one, I tell you now, I'd get really frustrated and probably a little upset about the car not doing what I wanted it to do.
And also, Eddie, looking at everybody else driving cars, you might think, oh, well, they can all drive, but I'll never be able to drive.
Yeah, you might. Yeah, this is right. So there is this. I'm just sort of trying to point out that these differences do exist, and they're going to remain the same unless we work against them. Like for me, I'll never be able to drive a car unless I actually really want to drive a car, have a reason to drive a car, get some training in it, probably go to one of those, get a driving school teacher, get in the car, all that sort of stuff, just like you guys have done if you know how to drive a car. It's the same here. So we know this phenomena exists, and some people, very few, but there are people who are greatly compassionate. And not only that, but there's others, many others training themselves in it. So if we do not want our compassion to go up and down and waver as mine presently does, then we need to do something about that. And that something is the training in it. Now, the other thing is that we have what we call like some similarities to this great compassion, and they're rooted in ordinary compassion. So one is based around our desire. We want to be happy, and we want to avoid suffering. So this wanting to avoid suffering, this compassion we have. We also know other people are just like us. So it's not just the personal, it's larger. In fact, you could say every sentient being, any sentient being, you could say, yeah, look, I'm existing and I just love suffering. I want to suffer. Right? Any sentient being, anything with a conscience will move away from anything that hurts them. But if they know it hurts, they want to move away. We and others have a natural concern for ourselves and for others. And this concern is about our happiness and suffering. So again, it's the field is larger than just ourselves. And as a sentient being, we suffer. So we experience the effects of suffering because we have the causes for that suffering. Now, so this goes right across the board for everyone. So suffering is common to all of us, but also the desire to be free from it. And the suffering that's common to us is what we can say is like an effect. So it does have causes. It affects oneself and it does affect others. And we're all trying to avoid suffering. We're all trying to be happy. Now, being what we call a samsaric person or a samsaric being, we are subject to suffering and its causes. So we can ask ourselves, like, what are these samsaric sufferings? In fact, what's a samsaric being? We hear this word used a lot. So we're talking about samsaric sufferings. We're really talking about the 5 appropriated contaminated aggregates that the person is bound to. And it has what we call 3 marks. Meaning that it's miserable. It's impermanent and there's no self involved in it, meaning it's dependent. So the samsaric sufferings we're experiencing are dependent, they're changeable, but they are uncomfortable, they are like miserable. So if we ask ourselves, what makes up cyclic existence? Well, you could say, of course, these 5 appropriate contaminated aggregates. But Lama Tsongkhapa says that cyclic existence has 3 elements. He says it is that which is bound, that to which it is bound, and that which binds. So 3 things. That which is bound. So what is that then? What's that which is bound? And the answer is I, me. The I in the mental continuum, myself. Self is bound. To what is it bound? So there's a number of different answers here. So, and what they call given divisions. So he says the first, what we are bound to is uncontrolled birth. And this birth could be from a womb, from eggs, from heat and moisture, or even spontaneously. Or you could say that we are bound to the 5 different kinds of being we will become. Humans, animals, hungry ghosts, the demigods and so forth. Or you could say that we are bound to rebirth into the desire, form, or formless realms. And lastly, you could say, okay, so we've got, what is bound? You go the I and the continuum. What's it bound? Uncontrolled rebirth in any of these places, in any of these forms. And what's binding it? Karma and delusion. So, in a way, you can say, well, this is my situation, right? As a samsaric being, this is what I'm subject to. So I'm hurting. Rinpoche always says, when we talk about it's miserable, it's because it's not in your control. The suffering, it's like I said, it's under the control of delusion and karma.
Just stop the share for a while, Eddie.
Well, so it's not in our control, and we need to do something about that lack of control. So we need to work against the karma and the delusion. So one of the ways of working against the karma, so there's many ways we could talk about karma, but one of them is just sort of these activities, the actions that our body, speech, and mind engage in that are sort of repetitive and contribute to our suffering. So what's really repetitive about us is our concern about ourselves. Right? Our compassion is directed primarily at ourselves and those close to us. And like I said, it's filtered with expectation and attachment. So then, in terms of that karma side, we've got to exert some control over that. We've got to change that. And on the other side is the way that the mind sees everything as being truly existent and just accepts it. That's what we need to work on that side too. So we sort of got to go against ignorance, replace it with everything being independent, arising and empty. And on the other side, these activities that are taking place in sort of uncontrolled fashion, we've got to sort of slow that down and actually take some sort of control over it. So like using the same metaphor before about, if I wanted to learn to drive, it would be a good idea to go along, get a driving instructor and get some good instruction in this, right? And then after the instruction, you get it home, don't you? You sit behind the wheel, you might go out to find a big car park and you go and drive around, like you train yourself. You learn to drive. So here, it's a same idea. But while we're at home or anytime we get some time, think about like the great advantages of having greater compassion and the disadvantages of just leaving our compassion at the ordinary level. Now, I think that when we come across this type of material, you can see quite a large difference between ordinary compassion and great compassion. There's a big difference there. So I think one of the natural things that will happen is that we will end up asking questions about both types of phenomena until we're comfortable in ourselves and go, okay, I can accept That ordinary compassion is like this. This Miffy?
Sorry, I'm just going to come and adjust your settings so you can keep talking.
So ordinary compassion is like one way, but the great compassion is quite a bit different. And being quite different, I have questions about that. So what sort of questions might we come up with? So I've been thinking about this, and then I ran it through the artificial intelligence to see how many questions could you come up and what would you come up with. It came up with a lot of good questions. So I just thought I'll just take a few of them and put them up to the class and see what we think about it, right? So let's have a look at, I retained 4, but I had like about 11. And I thought that's too many to ask. We'll just take these 4 here. So listen, our first question would be, so why should I have compassion for someone who has hurt me? This seems a natural question for me to ask. I was just thinking, well, we're talking about this great compassion, and that sort of absorbs and holds people who have hurt me. And not just me, my family members, people I like, people I respect. Not only that, but even, pets, animals. Why should I be concerned about their suffering when they're hurting me? And
Eddie, Eddie, I've heard people say this at Lungri Tompa Centre, and it's a very common worldly thing.
Sure.
Like you're insane actually if you care for someone who's harmed you.
So by asking this question, so we can see, wow, what a big difference there is between this phenomenon called great compassion and an ordinary compassion. Because this way of ordinary compassion goes, I care about the people. I wish that the people I know and care for wouldn't experience the suffering they're experiencing. But these people who really hurt a lot of other people, like when they get hurt, either through the justice system or other people, well, fair enough, they deserve it. So would anybody like to have a suggest any answers to why we should have compassion for someone who's harmed us? Because the usual thing is that if somebody has harmed us, what's the usual way we think about them?
Anger.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Anger.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Right. So either we can shrug it off and try to be indifferent to it, not care that they have, or we can usually get angry, right? Fire up and often respond to hurt with hurt. So why not do those previous behaviors and now be really concerned for their suffering?
I guess where I go, Eddie, is those negative emotions that one tends to have when someone harms you or someone you love. Those are very destructive to oneself.
Very good. That's right. It's like they hurt us twice, eh? We get hurt twice. It's true. So this is a great reason to not return harm with harm, because we will hurt ourselves. So if we do that, we're certainly extending compassion to ourselves by not responding to harm with harm. We're not adding another layer of hurt to ourselves. Well, that's to ourselves. That's true.
Eddie, for me, it kind of reflects back on the eight verses of mind training where it says,
I take these people and I look at them as my best teachers, right? Because
Yep.
the people I really care about, yeah, they can irritate me, but I know I'm going to forgive them because I love them, right? But the people that I don't like very much, that's a whole different. So I don't have the same incentive to be compassionate with them. And yet that's, I think, in Buddhism, what we're called to do. We're called to rise up above that and say, not just for my friends, not just for the stranger, right? That poor starving African child, but also for the people who have actually gone out of their way to harm us. Even if I've done something good for them, I need to come up with that.
Yeah, it's a big ask of us, isn't it? You know, from where we are, and then suddenly we come across something like this. So one of the things that we know will not work, is if, like we say, if you respond to harm with harm, you will hurt the other person and you will hurt yourself. So does that actually help the other person in any way at all? You'd probably have to say, well, I couldn't be sure, at least there, but probably not, right? I've just heard him. Miffy.
Yeah, this reminds me of what His Holiness was saying about intelligent selfishness. So, you know, if we actually want to stop the person harming ourselves or others, we have to be able to step into their shoes to understand them so we can help them change or stop or heal or anything like that. And the only way you can do that is if you have compassion. You can't do it if you separate yourself out. So it's kind of in our best interests to put ourselves in their shoes.
You know, so when I ask these questions with the AI, I often put it say, look, I am a 10-year-old child and I've just heard this, you know. So I put in the teachings that I've been going through, and then it said, and you know, like I'm brand new to Buddhism, I'm just 10 years old. What sort of questions can I ask? You know, so the AI came back with one of these questions. And I find them quite challenging myself, you know, because it requires you to really sort of think there, isn't it? So I think that one of the answers you could come up with here is to ask yourself, so we have a goal, don't we? You know, like our goal is to become enlightened. So, and we cannot become enlightened unless we have this great compassion. So if we don't have a compassion that holds everybody, we will never become enlightened. So, you know, you could say that. You could say, well, yeah, well, because I want to become enlightened, and it's necessary for me to have this type of compassion. But that may not be strong enough for you. It might be, it might not be. So again, you sort of have to ask some good questions of yourself.
Eddie,
Yep.
why do you think that saying has so much hold in, well, at least in our language, revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yeah.
I mean, that's either really talking about really intense revenge, or else it's talking about think about it. No, actually, I think it's just intense revenge.
Yeah, it's asking that with that saying. It's saying, yep, think about it, and don't be emotional about it. Don't do it while you're in a in the grip of anger. Just be very clear about what you're doing, so you're successful in it. You know, and if you have that clarity of thought, you're most likely to be successful in your act of revenge. Whereas if you're overcome by anger and other disturbing emotions, all sorts of funny things can happen then. It's like, I read these stories of one of the best ways, I used to do this myself.
Eddie, stop the screen.
Thank you. Okay. Is if you want to have, if you're going to have a fight with somebody, try and get them as upset as possible. Because then they lose their clarity. They don't really know what they're doing, and you have a greater advantage over them.
By the way, everybody, this is Australian irony. I don't know, Eddie, if Americans get it, they may actually think that you're like being honest and sincere.
Oh no, I am. Especially, no, of course. No, this is how I was, especially at school. When I was growing up as a kid, it was always heaps of violence, fighting, and I always knew if I could just get them, get into their mind and screw them up a little, I've got the advantage. And nearly every, if you look at all the boxers, that's what they're doing. When they stand in front of each other and they do this, the argy-bargy, what they're trying to do is get the other person to get upset. They want them to lose their the coldness, the rationality, Susan.
So it's advocating for thoughtful revenge.
Yeah, so later on when I came to Buddhism and I read about the hell realms, I went, oh my God, that's me, right? That's what I do. I go to this real cold rationality and go, this is what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and da-da-da. And I thank goodness, many of those ideas, I never ever carried them out. But I know that's how my mind works. And I think part of that's got to do with, I used to watch my father get so upset. So he wasn't one of those cool, cold thinking fellas. He was like hot anger, right? And I used to watch him lose it and just have no respect for him. So I think I'm not going to be like that. Like, I'm not going to be seen to be like an idiot like that. Right? This is like this hot anger, right? You just lose it. I thought, no, like, think about it. But, in the bigger scheme of things, isn't it? Neither way is good. Hot anger, cold anger. They're going to harm the person who's angry. And so, we're just we're not very kind to ourselves, and we certainly aren't kind to the other person we're dealing with. Let's get back to some of these questions. And so here, of course, I've not tried to answer them all. It's just something to think about ourselves. Well, you need to go through this to sort of start authentically, start from a good place. Otherwise, we bring all our crap in there with us and we sort of poison it. So another question we could ask here is, okay, I know I'm biased. I know I have prejudices. I know I've got negative emotions to others, but how can I overcome them? I guess, from a Buddhist perspective, like, we know we can. Otherwise, it's just these sort of senses the Buddha giving us teachings. Like, it's all focused on that, isn't it? We know we're biased. We have to acknowledge that. How do we get rid of this bias? We know we're prejudiced. What do we do to stop it? The third question that came up was, but isn't it difficult to change my feelings towards someone who has consistently treated me poorly? And again, the answer is yes, of course it's difficult. It is difficult. But at the same time, it's doable. You can do it. It has been done before. So this is where I find, I like reading autobiographies, stories of people's lives, because you often find that these people are just like us, but they did something about it. And so they become like unbiased. They lost many of their prejudices. Their negative emotions decreased. They were able to change their feelings to somebody who treated them poorly. And the Buddha Dharma, I mean, it's just full of that, isn't it? 84,000 teachings to overcome 84,000 types of afflictions. So yes, it's not, easy, but it's possible to do it. And I think each one of us, if you just look back over your own experiences, you find that you've actually done this. There have been times when you had a particular way of looking at somebody or an event, and then you might have changed. And you just don't look at it like that anymore. Then the fourth question I got out of these 11 was, how can I cultivate empathy and concern for others when I may not fully understand or relate to their experiences? So I want to put this one in because, there's sort of, in the Buddhist text is saying, you need to extend compassion to the beings in hell, the animal realms, the hungry ghost realms. We've got these beings in the higher God realms. They're all suffering to some degree or another. Yes, Miffy.
Well, you know what I'm going to say, which is stop the share, but also something else, which is I often thought that I'd have to go through the same things as others to be able to understand. So I went and did a whole lot of risky behavior just to see.
Sure.
And probably it wasn't actually necessary. But at the time I thought it was the only way to be able to understand people.
Yeah, well, I'm the same. I did sort of same things. Yeah. And then I met my first Buddhist monk, and he asked this great question: what do you think? If you want to find out this, is it necessary to do what, walk a mile in their shoes, or to meditate? And I just straight off, no, mile in their shoes, just like them. And Pende, the monk, didn't say anything. He was just quiet. So, because he didn't say yes, I had to think about it. He said, he didn't say yes. Maybe it's what I'm thinking is not right. And then when I thought about it, I thought, oh man, that's sort of a bit crazy there, Eddie. Like being pretty close shaves here, So I said, no, actually, experience it's so much mental, isn't it? Whether you want to engage in risky behavior, the behavior of what's going on is not separate from your mind. I mean, you have an experience. But I thought, gee, it'd be a lot safer to just have the experience sitting at home and thinking about it than going out there and doing it. So what do you think, anybody? Is it necessary that we fully understand or fully relate to their experiences?
Well, maybe not fully, but we at least have to try to understand them to some extent. Walking in their shoes would help to do that. So I don't understand why that would be a wrong answer.
Yeah.
Do both, walk in their shoes and meditate.
And it's mentally walk in their shoes, isn't it? Just consider it, imagine it.
Yeah.
Eddie, it's quite difficult to imagine putting yourself in someone else's position. I mean, there's a couple of things like, when people talk about neurodiversity and the double empathy problem of where we experience others from our point of view, not from their point of view. And it takes a lot of presence of mind to be able to think like somebody else. And then on the other hand, like when we think about animals and anthropomorphize them and think that they're just like us, they experience just like us, but they experience like animals. So how do you get yourself out of yourself to be able to, in your mind, put yourself in someone else's shoes?
Through imagination is the only way you can do it. It's imagination. So one thing you have to realize is that it's always your own mind, right? It's not somebody else's mind. You can't do that. We just try and imagine as closely as possible or you read material written by somebody who's done the same thing, imagine it, but better than you and has been able to write it, or even put it in a film in some way. Barbara, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say that I think even imagination is going to fall short. I just don't think that we can ever know someone else's mind and know their situation. We can imagine, and I think that that's the closest that we can probably do.
Yep, that's right, and that's I agree. That's the closest we can do. So then,
And probably the imagination isn't not like, oh, what would I do in that situation? The imagination is, what type of person are they in that situation? Because it's not us putting ourselves there. We're trying to figure out what the other person is like. And I just don't think we're that used to it. You know, we just go, oh, if that happened to me, I'd be devastated. But that's not what we're trying to imagine here. We're trying to imagine what the other person's going through.
Yeah, we're trying to imagine their devastation. Not the fact that we can go up there and say these words, but it's like, what would it actually feel like to have that happen to me? So, like I said, for many of us, you know, it's hard to do. So that's why I think it's often very useful then to rely upon others who are much better than us. So that these are usually good writers. But because when you read something, your imagination's at play. So a couple of days ago, about a week ago, I did a meditation on the lower realms. And I was trying to, you know, so you got to go, okay, you got to imagine yourself as being one of these beings in a lower realm. What's the experience like? You know? And so I'm going there, it's like, I've got an absence of imagination about this, right? I don't know, right? But I remembered reading a book about this and how it affected me as a child when I was at school. So I was going to do a meditation on the sufferings of the animal realms, right? So I remember that when I first read about the suffering of animals that affected me most was Jack London. When he wrote White Fang and Call of the Wild, right? Like he got inside that wolf and the dog, right? And he gave the view of this is what it's like to be me. So I never forgot that. It was like had a big impact on me as a kid reading that.
Yeah.
So,
Or Watership Down as well.
Yeah, stories like that. You know, other great writers have done the same. They've hopped into, they make up a character. And if you're interested in that character, it's because of the psychology of the character. Right? You're right along there with them.
Yeah, I agree with that, Eddie, because if we just use total imagination, knowing nothing about it, we're subject to delusions, delusional imagination. And so if we can learn from reading from different perspectives, that can help aid our imagination to be more realistic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so anyway, that's just like I tried. I just realized, you know, I sometimes I just can't do it. I don't get it. This only means, okay, I need to find somebody else who does get it, and you know, try, like you said, you know, get into their mental way of being. You know, these shoes we keep talking about. What would that be like for me? And I remember when I was a kid at school, the only real thing I liked about school, the real strength I had was writing. And I remember my English teacher really encouraged me to keep writing and reading. So they gave me a big reading list of different books. But what became apparent to me through these readings was I thought, shit, I'm just making it up. It's not real. And so that really, I stopped writing pretty much quickly after that. Two reasons. One, I thought there's lots of other writers out there have done it so much better than I can. I'll just read what they've got to say. But this idea of making it up. So then I become a bit like the empathy, right? Then the dangerous behaviors follow. It's like, well, how will I know? How will I know? Like I want to write truthfully, authentically. And just making it up, that's not being truthful or authentic. I have to know. Yeah, so then my life took a,
Yeah.
a left
Well,
turn.
I mean, you can know, and then you can extrapolate, which
Yeah. But like Pendo was saying, there's different ways you can know something, right? Yeah, but all the time, the only knowing that's really going on is your consciousness is the knower. Right? So then I realize, my God, I don't have to put myself in these really dangerous situations to know something. Actually, I could just sort of sit here and run it through. And of course, it won't be exactly the same, but it'll be a similitude of it. It's usually something close. So it's like you said, Susie, when we say, we don't say to other people doing, I know just how you feel, because we don't. Right? But in our own imagination, we could get some similitude of it. Like so we're not thinking about them, we're thinking about what would happen, how would I be if I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 nights? What if my child was missing? How would I behave? Wouldn't I behave very similar to them? And if I'm saying no, I wouldn't, why?
Eddie,
Yep, yes, Barb?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you were talking about extensive compassion,
Yeah.
Compassion for the other realms other than animal and human just has not been on my radar. Compassion. I mean, I think about beings in the hell realm, and it's more to do with what you're talking about, imagining what that would be like.
Yeah.
And my question is, clearly, to have compassion for any being, whichever realm they're in, is beneficial to me. Does it help beings in other realms to have compassion? And I don't even know how to have compassion. I don't know what would be beneficial to somebody, to a hungry ghost. I don't know how to have compassion for them that would be beneficial. Or is it beneficial for them? Can it make a difference?
Well, I would often think so. Do you know anybody who's compassionate towards you, Barbara?
Absolutely.
Does it make a difference to you?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Eddie, that reminds me, Barbara, your question, that movie Wings of Desire, and it's so nice because the characters, they know there are angels there, but they can't see them. So they talk to them as if they were there in their mind. So they're talking, the angel's actually standing there, they're looking in the wrong direction, but they know they're in the vicinity. So it's like a once removed thing. But I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche talking about the hungry ghosts, and he said something about how incredibly shy they are. And it just suddenly became real to me that even though I have no idea about them, can't see them, anything, here's someone who does. And not only that, there's really personal experience of just how shy they are. And I know what shyness is like. And it just came alive for me then.
So sometimes when in the thing that might help, Bob, is if you think, okay, well, I find it very difficult to imagine these other beings, and then and especially with the descriptions and so forth, and then to extend a compassionate thought towards them or feeling towards them. What can be very useful then is to look at what you look at what is the cause that produced this effect. So then you go, okay, so the causes of the hungry ghost are this great neediness, never ever getting enough. And we might
miserliness.
And a sense of what do you call that, Miffy? Where poverty, a sense of they're poverty stricken. They do not have enough, and whatever they have has to be kept, cannot be shared.
They're like ultimate hoarders.
Yeah, like that, right? So just like at the ultimate hoarder, right? So then go, okay, gee, I can see if I can watch the hoarders on TV. Right? They've got shows about them, isn't there? Then you see those people, you go, now could you have compassion for someone like that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
right? You go, yeah.
Yes.
So the only real difference here is that it's just appearing in the human body, but it's the mind. It's the mind that's making them like this, and it's the mind that can give them the body of the hungry ghost, right? So, well, you know, I can't see those, you know, I'm just imagining the bodies, but I know about the mind. So the mind in the human being that is like this is the cause for they have a similar type of mentality, but now it's hungry ghost. So we just have a
And
different
by
body.
having compassion for them,
Yeah.
is it changing their plight at all? Can it help them get out of being a hungry ghost realm quick? I guess I keep going to, how is that benefiting them? I understand it in human to human contact. How
Okay.
compassion, or with animals. Again, I get those two realms, and is it helping them?
Well, I'll just say the same thing. Like if somebody else extends compassion to you, does it help you? And if you say yes, well,
Mhm.
then it goes the other way too. Right?
And how does it help them?
Well, how does someone having compassion towards you help you?
I mean, it to me, it's support, it's unconditional love, it's those kind of things. I guess where I'm stuck is not knowing how it is beneficial to them. Is it helping them shorten their time as a hungry ghost, for instance? How is me thinking of a random hungry ghost
No.
helping them? You know what I mean? I'm just stuck there, and I guess I just need to think about it.
Yeah, no, that's right. And when you think about it, Bob, then like I said, think, okay, so the Buddha taught all sentient beings out of great compassion. Right? So does it help you? So you can say, okay, so I'm not a Buddha, but I still have compassion. And so, we've got to come back again to this idea of like, what is this compassion we're talking about? But what is it? We'll just go on.
Thank you.
Share screen. So to help us move from ordinary compassion to either immeasurable compassion or great compassion, we need to do something. And these are the two things we need to do. Purify the mind and accumulate the energy, the positivity to actually do it. So what I mean by here, purification, I mean to use your reasoning to think this through. Now, equanimity, we can't just hop up into this great, have ordinary compassion and then go, now I'll go to great compassion. There's steps you need to take before you can get there. And one of them is the step of equanimity, to see that there's no difference between yourself and the other, conventionally and ultimately. Then the four opponent forces. To look at how our previous behaviors have been so self-centered, primarily on ourselves or those close to us, that our compassion has rarely gone beyond those boundaries. And so what can I do about that? Well, apply the four opponent forces. And always, like again, you come back to emptiness, but emptiness needs to bring you back out to dependent arising. So you know, okay, so great compassion is dependent. And in terms of the accumulation of the positive mental attitude, the positive force, these sort of things really help. A sense of friendliness towards others, to acknowledge that others are our friends and have been behaving friendly towards us for time after time after time. For all the goodness that others have done to us, and then to reciprocate that. And this deep knowledge of suffering. So just saying that, so, you know, just thinking about what you've been saying, Barb, right? So this thing of going, yeah, but how does it work? How can I help? Does it really help? Right? These are just, in ways, expressions of our suffering, of our not knowing. Right? And this goes like everybody, just like you're saying, but how? I don't know. I go, yeah, I'm the same. I don't know. There's lots of things I don't know how to do either.
Eddie, the deep knowledge of suffering, it makes me think that if we have the courage to recognize suffering, either our own or others, I mean, the thing is having the courage to recognize it instead of shy away from it, and that having that courage and giving you the deep knowledge of suffering, then you're in a state of readiness to be able to help anybody else, because you're not shying away trying to protect yourself anymore.
Yeah, and I was just thinking like how many of us try to anesthetize our suffering. Right? So, you know, we go down the doctors, we want pills, we want to stop the suffering, our own, but then doing that, then we don't see the suffering in the other. And again, like suffering depends, right? Because it's dependent, we can work with it. We can either remove its conditions or remove its causes, or we can hinder the conditions, hinder the causes, you know, get in the way somehow. Which again, so this brings me back to, leads us into the next slide. So I'm just going to call this like starting out. So when we start out, I suggest we've got to look at what hinders us right now. What stops us being compassionate towards ourselves and towards others? You know, is it, you know, we all have certain types of fears. We have prejudices. We've got expectations. All of these ideas, and they're just mental ideas. They can block us being compassionate. They hinder ordinary compassion, but they certainly get in the way of the extraordinary compassion. So we need to acknowledge that we have hindrances. The second thing is like understanding the wide range of sufferings that there are. So most of us, our knowledge of pain and suffering is really on the surface level. You know, the suffering of pain, disappointment, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, and so forth. Birth, death, all these things, right? But most of us are quite unaware, or seem to forget completely, that even rich people suffer. The person who has everything that we want is actually suffering. That any happiness anybody experiences, even when they're like really joyful, you understand, gee, that's not going to last long. Yeah, it just comes down to this neutral state, and what's the point of this neutrality is suffering.
And Eddie, there's that continuous like underlying suffering of just uncertainty, isn't there, that we try and block out, but it's there for everybody. And then as it heightens, like with housing insecurity or food insecurity, it's there, but it's like a continuous background hum.
Yeah, I just think so. Just background hum is you know, this what we call, you know, the five aggregates subject to clinging. You know what they call, you know, the what's it called, the dukkha of
Conditionality.
Conditionality. So, if you just look at yourself and the world we're in, it's conditions, isn't it? It's just made up of all these things that are like not in our control. There's no controller from the top of the crown of your head down to the bottom of your feet. There's no controller in here looking after your body and mind. Right? The I is just a name given to it all. But there's no real you in there doing this and that to make it all work out. And everything in your body is just conditions. And your mind is like that, and all the stuff outside you. And it's all impermanent, all subject to change. Like, my God, what a world. Right? It's like, whoa. And there's just these sort of little chunks coming out that we call me or the other, And then a little bit of time goes by and it's gone, isn't it? This thing called death comes. And then we're not there anymore. Or neither's the other person. Or the car's not there, the house is not there. Most of the things that were there 2,000 years ago are not here now. They've all gone. And none of it is within the sort of control of the human. We think it is, but it's not. So this suffering is so wide and deep. I think no wonder they call it like an ocean, the ocean of suffering, And this hits like individuals like ourselves. And so that's where we got to start. Like I said, we have to go, well, I am subject to change. I don't have a self in there that's a controller. Every part of my body is impermanent, subject to change. And I don't have much control over the whole process. So now then, okay, this is the way to how can you relate to yourself compassionately? Because compassion's got this element of like, I want to put an end to the suffering. I'm going to take that responsibility, right? I'm going to put an end to the suffering. And then we see the suffering is not just for ourselves alone, but all classes of beings. Any being that's not an enlightened being is undergoing some form of suffering. So, like you could say, well, I cannot be really certain that these beings exist or not. And you say, well, are you certain that they don't exist? And you probably have to go, well, no. I'm not certain they do exist, I'm not certain that they don't. Well, whether they do or not, I know if I could be compassionate, if I could extend compassion, this is really good for me. It's tremendous for me. Whether it affects the other being or not, well, that's like you're saying, Barb, I don't know. But you could say, well, when others extend compassion to me and I know they care about my suffering, it affects me. So then it means that if someone's doing that to me and I'm affected by it, surely it will be the same with me extending compassion to somebody. They would know that could affect them.
Yeah, Eddie, it's like,
yeah.
Oh, just thinking it's like it's a real comfort to know that someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Geshe Sherab, they think about us genuinely and care. And just to know that somebody cares makes a huge difference, even if you never get to speak to them.
Yeah, and in those times, if you remember when I'll just do this last one in the chat. So there's this great similarity then. So there's a similarity within the classes of beings and us. But we're all in the same boat here. We're all in the same ocean. So I was just thinking, when we used to go to the airport we still probably will, when the lamas come in. Yeah? So I remember one time, we went off to greet Lama Zopa Rinpoche when he came, and it was, many of us had never met him before. So there was a long line of people all sitting there with their katas, And he went along from each person, held their hands, put the card around their neck, then put his forehead on theirs, like real close. And then he said, "What's your name?" So then he'd ask for their name. Then he would hold their hand and look at them in their eyes. And gosh, was thinking, you go, wow, man, like this is somebody who cares about me. So it made a huge impact on me. They go, these are the people, they're doing it. Right? They care, and like we're being affected. I remember another great Lama who was Holiness Draken Rinpoche. So he, I just looked at him and just burst into tears because the care, the care was just like, whoa. It affected everybody, physically. So lots of people crying. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I went, whoa, okay. This kindness, this compassion is palpable. So I'd suggest the same, Bob. So just as, the humans, we can do it like that. I was open to the beings in the lower realms, especially with their shyness. You've got to go, okay, so I'm just going to try a little harder. So which leads us to this meditation that we can do. So I'll just run you through it. So you can use this one here for either the immeasurable compassion or the great compassion. And you can see we can go these 7 steps. So just like it says in the thought training, 7-point mind training, you begin with yourself. Acknowledge that there are things that cause you suffering, primarily the self-grasping ignorance and the results of our own karma. So we say, like, may I be free from suffering. So when I read this, it also had the term was, may I be free from suffering and the root of suffering. I just turned, you can put all sorts of things in here, but I think you've got to acknowledge that suffering has its causes. So when who was it? Pema Chodron, Venerable Pema Chodron, she put in, may I be free from suffering and the root of suffering. I thought, now that's really getting at the self-grasping ignorance, right? For ourselves, lots of things could arise. It could be that, but it could also be like selfishness. If we know, man, like my sense of self, it's being selfish. Grasping at self where there isn't a true self and being selfish. These are the causes of suffering. Or may I be free of those? So these 2 causes actually cause us suffering. The thing is, they cause everybody suffering. So we could go down to the next thing. May this person that I feel very, very close to, and that you already have compassion for, or an animal you are concerned for. So if your animal is sick or dying or undergoing some sort of great difficulty, you will have compassion for them. You would like that suffering you like them to be free from the suffering. If you have a good friend that's presently sick or undergoing an operation or anything like that, you will have compassion for them naturally. So it's just taking this understanding, I naturally feel that. Well, may they be free from suffering and its causes. Now you've got other friends that are not actually, they're suffering, but it's not obvious to us. But they are your friends and you do care about them. And, even if they're happy right now, that happiness is subject to change. Just because they have the body and the mind of a human being, that body and mind is subject to suffering, just like ours is. So may my friend be free from suffering and its causes. So you see here that the terms are always the same. This is just to make it easier for us. You just get used to the thing. We could sort of like meditation, repetitive meditation, getting used to this thought again and again and again. So it becomes very simple and easy to do. So let me just lead you through this. It'll only take a couple of minutes. So please, get comfortable in the seat. So I want you, first of all, to acknowledge that you, as a human being who's not enlightened, are suffering to some degree. So acknowledge that. And so may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Say it a few times. May I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Now think of somebody who's very close to, who's presently undergoing some form of suffering. Or an animal that you know who's suffering and you're concerned for. And again, make this wish. May this person or this animal be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Now think of any friend that you have and make the wish for them too. And then somebody that you don't know very well at all, a stranger. This person too is experiencing suffering and has the causes for suffering. Make a wish that they be free. Now, somebody who doesn't like you or somebody you don't like, the person you have difficulty with, that person, if they are unenlightened, they are subject to suffering and its causes. It really contributes to their difficulty, the causes of suffering. Make a wish that they be free. Now, see yourself, or acknowledge yourself. Put an animal at your feet, or somebody really close that's sick. Another friend, a stranger, and a difficult person. Make the wish that all five be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And now see yourself as a small group of 5 people, 5 beings, surrounded by millions and millions of people. None of them enlightened, all of them suffering, all of them subject to impermanence, to misery, to grasping in a self where there is none. Make a wish that all beings be free from suffering and the causes. And now just dedicate that energy that you've spent generating, the energy of compassion, direct it towards its result. I want to develop this great compassion to act as the foundation for the mind of enlightenment. And depending upon the mind of enlightenment, I want to become enlightened to benefit others. This is my goal. And this is why I'm doing it. want to benefit others. Okay, let's let that go. And now we'll come to basically our last slide for the day. So this is one that I introduced to you last week. Last week we did the elders, but today what I'd like you to do is this one here is focused on the peers, right? So peers, of course, relate to your family, your siblings, brothers and sisters, classmates, friends, associates, people who work with you, other helpers. So these people are like all in this life. And just ask yourself, can I be certain that any of these first people are enlightened? They're Buddhas? If you go, no, I'm not sure they are. I don't know about that. So, well, then they might be unenlightened. And if they are, they're experiencing different forms of suffering. And think, like, man, it's difficult suffering. It's hard. I know that myself because it's happened to me. So just as I want to be free of it, I'll make a wish that they be free of it too. I've often seen one of the best places you can do this is at the hospitals. Like, it's so obvious to you, isn't it? Oh my gosh, this is ordinary sentient beings. These are not glamorous people in the magazines. These are the ordinary people like me. But even those glamours, man, like all subject to change, right? It's all out of their control. May they be free from suffering and its causes. May they be free. May I become a Buddha to help them even more effectively. It's just like you're saying, Barb, right? It's just like, as a sentient being, our help is so limited. At this stage, it's like a wish. It's a wish. But as Lama's Zopa says, that's where it begins. It's the tip of a wish. Let's start there. Okay, so what's our takeaway for today? Well, one of them is that our ordinary compassion is the ground, is our starting place, our foundation. But we need to purify it. It's like sift out what gets in the way of making it authentic, great compassion. Miffy? Yeah.
I just wanted to say, in that meditation, I found it so effective having all 5 people in front of me, like this whole range, but not too overwhelmed. I could really feel like a sense of equanimity, having that small kind of bite-sized range of people there in front of me, and then extrapolating out to the multitudes was kind of a little bit more authentic, because normally when we do just the 3, friend, enemy, stranger, doesn't have that effect on me. Whereas that one, it was just really great having all 5, of those beings there.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was like this, like a great sea of groups of 5. You found, wow, here's our little 5, and all around me there's all these 5s, and we're all the same. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, try to sift out some of the attachment and the expectations that we have, right? Just acknowledge we're the same, that we lack control of our body and our speech and mind. Right? Everyone's like that. All unenlightened beings are like that. And that makes it difficult for us to be happy. And this compassion, like, it's not natural, right? It relies a lot upon reasoning and thinking, and then the doing. With ordinary compassion, you don't need to do any of that, do you? It just comes up, right? But this is different. And that's why it's not so easy, and basically it's not so easy because it's new. We're not familiar with cultivating compassion. Like you say, Barbara, like thinking about it, really thinking about it, finding what actually gets in the way. What stops me? What stops me? It's an idea we have. There's some idea we have. What's that idea? Try and sift it out and challenge it. So until we see each other again, please read whatever you can on compassion. Consider those questions, or if you're going to say, doesn't require bravery, but if you want to just try something new, grab the AI and ask it something about compassion. Put some compassion in and say, let's see what you got to say. And then it's something to think about. It's useful. So we've come to the end, folks. Once again, thank you very, very much for engaging with me. Let's take the understandings, what we've thought about the energy of it all, and direct it towards becoming awakened, fully enlightened for the benefit of others. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, rise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures, and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. And may our own precious Guru Lama's Lama Rinpoche return to us again in a Manakaya form that we can identify and rejoice in. So praying for Rinpoche's swift return. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Okie dokie. Till next time. Thank you, Michael and Barbara, Susan, Shayla, Lou. Thank you very much. And
Eddie, do you have specific reading assignments or reading suggestions for that book on compassion by Thupten Choba and the Dalai Lama?
if you can get hold of them, read them. Yeah, I mean, they're very good books, both books.
I have the book. I have the book. I was wondering if you had specific
pages,
recommendations for which chapters I should read for this week or next week.
How about I think about that, Michael, and make sure I do that next week for you. Okay?
Yep.
And thank you for asking and bringing it up.
It might be in the course materials. Thank you.
Okay, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye then.